All right, everyone, so we're going to get to our last and final congruency theorem to prove that two triangles are congruent. All right, so this is all about right triangles, and hopefully we're all pretty comfortable with right triangles. I know most of my students always enjoy doing Pythagorean theorem and understand what a hypotenuse and a right angle is. So, in order to prove that two triangles are congruent using HL, you have to understand that if the hypotenuse and leg of one right triangle is congruent to the hypotenuse and the leg of another right triangle, then the triangles are congruent to each other. Okay? So essentially just look at both triangles. If they both have right angles, they both have the same hypotenuse, and one of the legs are the same, then that's enough for us to say that, hey, these two triangles are congruent to each other. All right? So, you know, the hypotenuse, of course, being the longest side of the triangle and the one that's opposite of the 90 degrees. You know, and then the legs being the other two shorter sides of that triangle. So let's kind of, and you know, I guess I can just go into a little bit more detail. Or like, let's say we had A, B, and C right there, and then this was D, E, and F. If I wanted to prove that these two triangles are congruent, well, all I would need to do is first prove that both hypotenuses are the same. So if I can prove that BC is congruent to EF, right? Well, that's one thing I got to do. I checked off that my hypotenuse, or the H of my HL theorem, is good, right? Then I just got to prove that one of these legs, like let's just say, for example, that BA, right, is congruent to ED, right? So there I've got a hypotenuse, I've got a leg. So that's all I would need to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. All right, so let's see if we can go ahead and figure these out. This would be a much shorter lesson than a lot of the other ones. So, because it's pretty simple, it's just two things that we're looking for. So first of all, let's look at example one. What they gave us is that triangle LMP and triangle MNP are right triangles. Perfect. So we have right triangles here, and we know that that angle right there is also a right triangle. They also tell us that ML, so ML is congruent to MN. All right. So those are pretty much the first two statements that we have here, given and given. All right. So if you couldn't tell, like, first of all, the ML and MN, those are the sides that are opposite of the 90 degrees. So when it comes to our HL theorem, we already proved that the hypotenuse is the same. Now we got to figure out that one of those legs is the same. Well, if you think about it, if I broke apart those two triangles, right, and this triangle has PM, and this triangle also has PM, well, isn't PM and PM going to be congruent to each other? So we know that PM, oh, sorry, they pretty much said that right here. MP is congruent to MP. And again, we know that, and hopefully you remember from the previous sections, that that is a property of the reflexive property. Or that is true of the reflexive property. I don't know why I said the word twice. All right. So right there, we have a hypotenuse and a leg that's congruent. Then we can go ahead and say that triangle LMP is congruent to triangle MNP by the HL theorem. All right. Last example, this is all we would need. So over here they say that triangle WVX, so WVX, and triangle YZX are right triangles. So WVX, so this is a right triangle, and we know that this is a right triangle. They also say that WV is congruent, so WV is congruent to YZ. All right. So, and they say that X, this is the midpoint of WY, right? So we know that this right here is the mid. Sorry about that, I got interrupted. So let me go ahead and continue this. So we went ahead and established that X is the midpoint of this. Now we got to prove that these two triangles are somehow congruent to each other. All right, well, let's go ahead, and this time we didn't provide you with any statements, so we're going to go ahead and come up with them ourselves. So we know that, let's see, we know that angle WVX and angle YZX are right triangles. I'm sorry, triangle though, are right triangles. Right, that was given to us. Okay, we also know that WV is congruent to YZ given. All right, that's the easy part, because we, we're just pretty much copying and pasting whatever is given to us. So we know that X is the midpoint of segment YW, also given to us. Now, the other thing we can do is, if we know that this is the midpoint, then doesn't that mean that WX and XY are... Sorry, I got interrupted again. But we know that these two segments are going to be congruent to each other. So we know that WX is congruent to YX, and that's just because of the definition of a midpoint. So right there, we've already established the hypotenuse, this side, is congruent to this hypotenuse on that side. And then we also have a leg that's congruent to each other. So we can go ahead and say that triangle WVX is congruent to triangle YZX, and because of the HL definition. So we're going to go ahead and end it there. Hopefully this video was helpful. And if you need anything else, let any of us know. Take care.